The Timane plantation rose like a gleaming white jewel against the lush landscape of South Carolina's low country. Its columns stretched skyward as though in prayer, though no amount of devotion could wash away the dark deeds committed within its walls. In the summer of 1836, the estate was celebrated throughout Charleston as a model of success. Its rice fields produced rich harvests. Its horses were admired and envied by neighboring planters, and its mistress, Elelanena Timane, earned respect for maintaining such prosperity despite her widowhood. Elelanena had buried her husband, Colonel William Timane, 3 winters earlier. Most widows might have crumbled under the weight of overseeing such a vast estate, but Elelanena had flourished. Under her direction, the plantation's output increased, a fact that left many Charleston elites puzzled. "Mrs. Timane, you continue to astonish us," Judge Holley commented during a summer soiree on the veranda. "Your cotton yield has exceeded even the Pinckney plantation this season." Eleanor, a woman of 45 with sharp features, once lovely in youth but now hardened by time, smiled with careful restraint. "God provides for those who provide for themselves, Judge Holley," she replied. What the judge and society failed to see was how Elelanena provided for herself. Behind the mansion's polished facade, past the manicured gardens where her 3 daughters entertained callers, stood a separate building, hidden by a grove of live oaks. The slaves called it the breeding house, though never within earshot of white people. That evening, after guests departed and twilight fell over the plantation, Elelanena retired to her study, ledgers open on a mahogany desk. The plantation's overseer, a large, rough man named Silas Webb, waited for her, hat clutched in weathered hands. "The new girl arrived from the Dalton auction," he reported. "Strong, healthy, should yield a good price for her first offspring." Elelanena nodded without looking up from her calculations. "Have her checked by Dr. Parnell tomorrow. I won't pay extra if she's barren." Her quill scratched across the page with deliberate precision. "And what of Mercy's child? Born that morning, a healthy boy, the perfect size." A cold smile crossed Elelanena's thin lips. "Excellent. That makes 3 this month. The traders from Georgia will be pleased." What remained unspoken was that Mercy was not a slave, but a handmaiden of Elelanena's own daughter, just 16, impregnated under her mother's orders. The child would be recorded as a slave, his maternal lineage erased. In the East Wing, Elelanena's 3 daughters, Caroline, Josephine, and Beatrice, prepared for bed, each keeping secrets that would soon collide into a horror none could avoid. Caroline, 22, stared from her window toward the slave quarters, hand drifting unconsciously to her stomach. Josephine, 20, wrote furiously in a journal she kept hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Beatrice, just 17, wept quietly into her pillow, fearful of her mother's plans for her upcoming birthday. None noticed that a newly arrived house slave named Isaiah watched the Timane mansion from the shadows of the oak grove. His sister had vanished into Elelanena's breeding program 3 months earlier, and he had deliberately been sold to the Timane estate with one purpose: to uncover the truth and, if possible, escape with her. The cicadas screamed through the humid night as a storm gathered on the horizon. By morning, rain would fall on the Timane plantation, but it would be nothing compared to the flood of secrets threatening to overwhelm them all. Isaiah's first morning at Timane began before dawn, his body still aching from the journey from Virginia. He had been purchased alongside 5 other men at the Charleston slave market, chosen for their strength and endurance. As he scrubbed the marble entry hall under the watchful eye of Agatha, the head house slave, he carefully listened for any word of his sister Ruth. "Keep your head down and your ears open in this house," Agatha whispered as she passed, voice barely audible. "Curiosity here can be deadly." Isaiah nodded subtly, continuing, his quiet observations. The household was already stirring above him. He could hear the soft steps of the daughters moving between rooms, the occasional sharp command from La Nena herself, and the rushed responses of the other household slaves. By mid-morning, he had been reassigned to the stables, where he met Jonas, an older slave who had worked on the plantation nearly 30 years. Jonas's hollow eyes reflected a man who had seen countless horrors. "You're new," Jonas observed as they cleaned the stalls. "Where'd they bring you from?" "Virginia," Isaiah answered cautiously. "Hanover County." Jonas nodded, eyes scanning for approaching overseers. "You got a purpose here?" Most men brought in lately got a purpose. Before Isaiah could answer, Silas Webb arrived, tracking mud from the morning rain. Both men immediately lowered their gaze and worked more diligently. "You," Webb said, pointing at Isaiah. "Mrs. Tremaine wants the new stock examined. Take this message to Dr. Parnell in town." He handed Isaiah a sealed envelope. The errand was unexpected fortune. Isaiah hoped for any chance to observe the plantation, and now he was sent beyond its limits. Perhaps he could gather information in town, or at least memorize the property layout for later. The walk to Charleston took nearly an hour. Dr. Parnell's office was near the harbor, a respectable building marked with a brass plate. Isaiah delivered the envelope to a pale-faced assistant. "Wait here," the assistant said, disappearing inside. Isaiah used the few minutes of relative freedom to study his surroundings. Nearby, two white men spoke in low tones. "Train's widow is sending another dozen next week," one said, checking his watch. "Fine stock, if a little young. The market is eager." "Tremaine's breeding program is the most efficient in the state," replied the other. Isaiah's heart raced. His fears were confirmed. The Tremaine plantation engaged in breeding slaves, intensified after the international trade was banned. His sister could indeed be there, forced into a cruel cycle of producing children sold away from her. The assistant returned with another envelope, this one for Mrs. Tremaine only. Isaiah's return journey followed a slightly different path, allowing him to see the back of the property. Behind the main house, past the kitchen gardens, he spotted the hidden building. Unlike ordinary slave cabins, it had glass windows, though heavy drapes covered them. A white-clad woman, not a slave, entered through a locked door, carrying what seemed to be medical supplies. That night, while other field hands slept, Isaiah slipped away to meet Phyllis, an elderly kitchen slave who had taken pity on him. Behind the smokehouse, where the smell of curing meat masked their whispers, he spoke. "My sister," Isaiah began. "Ruth, she should have arrived 3 months ago." Phyllis's worn face showed sorrow. "That building you saw? They call it the infirmary to decent folk. That's where they keep the breeding women. Is she there?" Isaiah's voice cracked. Phyllis nodded reluctantly. "Yes, but whatever you're planning, stop. No one ever leaves that place. Mrs. Tremaine has the law, the church, and the gun on her side." "The daughters?" Isaiah pressed. Phyllis glanced toward the house. "Caroline, eldest. She's her mother's daughter through and through. Josephine, she writes things down, dangerous things. Beatrice, the youngest, is next. When she turns 18, Mrs. Tremaine has plans for her too." Phyllis stiffened. "Someone's coming. Go." Isaiah melted into the shadows as the night watchman passed, lantern swinging. Sleep eluded him, Phyllis's words echoing in his mind. The Tremaine plantation was a horror beyond what he had imagined, and at its center lay a mystery that even the cruelest practices could not fully explain. Josephine Tremaine's hands trembled as she lifted the floorboard beneath her bed. The house had quieted. Mother was in her study, tallying accounts. Caroline entertained a neighbor's son in the parlor, and Beatrice had cried herself to sleep after another discussion about her responsibilities to the family. From the hidden compartment, Josephine retrieved a leather-bound journal and a small inkwell. Her record-keeping had begun 2 years ago as simple observations of the plantation's operations and the unusual arrivals of Dr. Parnell, but over time it had become both a compulsion and a dangerous act. August 17, 1836. Another girl taken to the infirmary today. Her name, Ruth. 17 women now held there. Mother has ordered special nutrition, fresh meat and molasses, items denied to regular field hands. Dr. Parnell now visits twice weekly. Josephine paused, recalling the grim truth she uncovered last winter. Her father's death was not from natural causes. Hidden in her mother's private ledger, separate from regular accounts, she found 20 years of a program so meticulous and ruthless it defied understanding. Selected women were forced into pregnancy. Eleanor experimented with bloodlines, combining different stock to control outcomes. Most horrifyingly, her sisters' names were noted. Caroline inducted at 18 as overseer of maternal health, Beatrice scheduled for her first term at 18. A soft knock at the door almost made Josephine spill her ink. She quickly replaced the floorboard. "Yes?" she called. The door opened to reveal Esther, a house slave. Eyes downcast, she said, "Miss Caroline requests your presence in the parlor. Mr. Blackwood has brought his brother." Josephine composed herself. "I'll be down shortly." These visits were never casual. Mother orchestrated them, evaluating potential husbands for genetic and social advantage. The Blackwoods were wealthy and established. If Mother approved, Josephine would be expected to encourage the match, a thought that turned her stomach. Downstairs, the parlor glowed with candlelight. Caroline sat poised, laughing at Thomas Blackwood's remarks. Beside him, his younger brother, Lieutenant James Blackwood, newly returned from military service, stood stiffly in formal attire. At 25, his soldierly, bearing and alert eyes scanned the room. "Miss Tremaine," he greeted with a bow, "your sister speaks highly of your achievements." "Caroline is too kind," Josephine replied, seating herself. "I hear of your time on the frontier, Lieutenant. Quite an adventure, I imagine." As James described the Western Territories, Josephine noticed Isaiah, the new house slave, entering the room. A tray of refreshments was carried around, and their eyes met briefly, too briefly for anyone else to notice, but long enough for Josephine to sense something important. This man moved differently from the others. His motions had purpose, and his carefully downcast gaze suggested awareness. Conversation flowed predictably until Eleanor Tremaine entered, perfectly timed to appear casual, though everything about the evening was orchestrated. She examined Lieutenant Blackwood with the same clinical detachment she applied to evaluating livestock. "Lieutenant," she said with a warm tone that didn't reach her eyes, "how fortunate to have you join us tonight. I understand your family's rice plantation borders our southern fields. Perhaps tomorrow you might tour the T-Main operations. We have some innovative methods I think will interest a progressive young planter." Josephine felt a chill. Her mother never invited outsiders to inspect the plantation without reason. What role did Lieutenant Blackwood play in her plans? Later that night, she wrote in her journal, "Mother has taken an interest in Littleton James Blackwood. He is to tour the plantation tomorrow, though I doubt the infirmary is part of it. Caroline seems aware of this arrangement. Beatrice's birthday approaches too quickly. Whatever Mother intends, I must find a way to stop it. Perhaps the new house slave, Isaiah, could help. Something about his manner suggests he is not what he appears." Outside her window, thunder rolled as another summer storm approached. Josephine could not shake the feeling it was an omen for the turmoil about to strike. Dr. Maxwell Parnell was meticulous. His instruments were spotless, records immaculate, observations clinical. These traits made him invaluable to Elena Tremaine's operation over the past decade as he worked in what the plantation slaves called the breeding house, officially the infirmary. He maintained the same professional air as in his Charleston practice. 12 rooms held 1 or 2 women each, depending on pregnancy stage or recovery. 16 women were there currently, 3 in their final month, 4 who had delivered in the past 2 weeks. Subject 23 shows excellent recovery, he noted to Nurse Hammond, a stern woman dismissed from a Boston hospital before joining Mrs. Tremaine. Milk production abundant, infant gaining weight appropriately. Subject 23. Ruth sat in a rocking chair by the window, nursing a 10-day-old infant. Her eyes were vacant, her spirit crushed by months of captivity, and the knowledge her child would be taken and sold within weeks. Continue for subjects 17 through 22. Discontinue for 23 until the infant is weaned. Mrs. Tremaine wants her ready for the next cycle by November, Nurse Hammond reported. Their clinical talk stopped with a knock at the main door. Nurse Hammond answered, returning with a sealed note. Mrs. Tremaine requests your attendance at dinner tonight. She's entertaining the Blackwood brothers and wishes to discuss their bloodlines. Dr. Parnell nodded. These dinners were carefully planned by Eleanor, assessing potential husbands for her daughters based on traits she wanted in her program. The doctor no longer questioned the morality of his work. The research was too valuable, the payment too generous. Later, he paused outside a locked room at the hall's end. Unlike the others, this door had no window. Only he and Elena held keys. Inside, preserved in jars, were failed experiments, malformed infants, stillbirths, unviable crossings. Eleanor insisted on keeping them for study. Beside the jars were meticulous records. Unknown to others, some specimens came from Eleanor's own family. The horror of the Tremaine plantation went beyond slavery, into something far darker. Eleanor was controlling the lineage of her own family to create superior specimens. Outside, Isaiah worked in the garden, overhearing conversations through open windows. The planned tour for Lieutenant Blackwood had begun, Eleanor showing her rice and cotton fields. Your irrigation is impressive, Mrs. Tremaine, Blackwood remarked. I'm impressed by your agricultural knowledge. Necessity breeds innovation, Lieutenant. When my husband died, many expected failure under a woman's hand. I was determined to prove them wrong. You've succeeded. Your yields are the county's envy. Elena's smile was sharp. But you haven't seen our most profitable operation, perhaps after dinner if interested, animal husbandry. Isaiah, pruning nearby shrubs, felt his blood run cold. The animal husbandry building was the breeding house. Was she planning to show a military man that part of the plantation? During dinner, Isaiah watched carefully. Caroline charmed Thomas Blackwood. Josephine was paired with James, though her conversation felt strained. Beatrice, youngest, barely touched her food, flinching whenever addressed. I understand your family is keen on selective breeding, Elena said over dessert. Your father's racehorses are famous. Yes, Mom, James replied, though our stable master deserves the credit. I've been away too long. You understand the principles, selecting traits, maintaining bloodlines. After dinner, I'll show a project few outsiders have seen. Isaiah nearly dropped the pitcher he carried. He had to warn Phyllis and Josephine. The tour would almost certainly include the infirmary, where his sister was held. Whispering to Phyllis, he said, She's showing him the breeding house tonight. Phyllis's eyes widened. Then she plans to involve him. Nobody sees that place unless they're part of it. I need to get in, Isaiah said. You'll get yourself killed, and her too, Phyllis warned. She slipped him a small key to the back door of the wash house, which connected to the infirmary through an underground passage. If you're caught, we all suffer, she said, voice trembling. Outside, the storm raged, giving Isaiah cover. Tonight might be his only chance to reach Ruth, but what awaited him inside the infirmary would be worse than imagined. A horror beyond slavery into science and human dignity that could shake Charleston society. Beatrice stared at her reflection, hollow-eyed. barely recognizing herself. In less than 6 weeks, she would turn 18, and her mother had made it clear what that meant. New dresses, strict diet, frequent examinations by Dr. Parnell, preparations for her family duty. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Josephine entered without waiting, closing the door. "We need to talk," she whispered. "About Mother's plans for you." Beatrice's hands trembled. "I can't, Josie. I just can't." Josephine sat beside her. "Listen, what happened to Caroline? The infirmary? It's all part of something terrible. Mother isn't just breeding slaves, she's—" "I know," Beatrice interrupted. "Caroline said it's my duty to the family, to the bloodline. Father started it all before I was born." Josephine's face went pale. "Caroline admitted that to you? That our father was selecting traits in slaves, livestock, and us?" Beatrice's voice broke. "Caroline says it's scientific. Mother continues his work. The T-main line will be superior." "It's monstrous," Josephine hissed, "and I won't let it happen to you." Lightning flashed outside, casting jagged shadows. Rain lashed the windows like desperate fingers. "I've been keeping records," Josephine continued, pulling her journal from a hidden pocket. "Everything I've observed, overheard, Mother's ledger, Dr. Parnell's visits, the women in the infirmary, and now she's bringing Lieutenant Blackwood into it." Beatrice looked up sharply. "What does he have to do with this?" "I don't know yet. But Mother never shows the breeding rooms to anyone outside the inner circle. If she is bringing him there, she must have plans." Josephine leaned in closer. "We need allies. I think the new house slave, Isaiah, might be able to help us." Beatrice's eyes widened in alarm. "A slave? That's crazy. If Mother finds out, his sister is in the infirmary. He came here on purpose to find her." Josephine took her sister's hands in both of hers. "Tonight, while Mother is busy with the Blackwoods, he will try to reach her." A board creaked somewhere in the hall. Both girls froze, staring at the door. For a long moment there was a terrible silence. Then footsteps moved away down the corridor. "We must be careful," Beatrice whispered. "Caroline reports everything to Mother and to Agatha, the head house slave. She is Mother's eyes and ears. Not all the servants are loyal to her, though. Phyllis in the kitchen is helping Isaiah." Josephine moved to the window to watch rain run down the glass. "Have you ever wondered about our births, about our mothers?" she asked. Beatrice looked puzzled. "What do you mean? Mother bore us all, didn't she?" "Did she?" Josephine answered softly. "I found entries in Father's private journal. He wrote about surrogates and host women. I think," she swallowed, "maybe we were born of the breeding program ourselves." The thought hung between them, too awful to take in at once. If it was true, then their whole lives were the result of careful selection. Their own mothers might be held in the place they call the infirmary. Before Beatrice could speak, a soft tap sounded at the door, a signal Josephine knew well as Phyllis's knock. She opened it a crack and found not Phyllis but Isaiah, his clothes soaked through, eyes wide and urgent. "Miss Josephine," he whispered, "your mother is taking the lieutenant to the infirmary now. I need your help to get my sister out." Josephine glanced back. Beatrice nodded almost without moving. "We'll help," Josephine said, "but you must help us expose everything that goes on here." "There's more," Isaiah said, voice tight. "When I used the passage from the washhouse, I found something else. A hidden room under the infirmary, jars." He had to stop. "Jars with infants, records with names and dates, your family names." Beatrice made a small, wounded sound. Josephine steadied herself against the doorframe. "Show us," she said finally. "Show us everything." As the three unlikely allies prepared to step out into the storm, Caroline waited in the shadows of the hallway, her face unreadable. In her hand lay the small pistol their father had given her before he died. The same weapon she had used to end his life when he had threatened to reveal the truth of the breeding program. Caroline had chosen long ago to stand with her mother's vision of a perfected line. She would not let her sister's weakness ruin what they had built. The storm turned the manicured grounds into a treacherous swamp. Isaiah led the sisters along a faint path that skirted the formal gardens, keeping near the trunks of great oaks. Lightning lit their progress in stark, frozen flashes. 3 figures hunched against the downpour, moving like shades between 2 worlds. The wash house stood some 50 yards from the main house, a squat brick building. The tunnel entrance lay beneath the big copper tubs. Josephine had her journal tucked into her bodice, wrapped in oilcloth to keep it dry. Beatrice followed close, her nightdress soaked, bare feet splattered with mud. Neither sister had ever left the main house without proper dress or an escort. This midnight walk, in storm and secrecy, was their first real act of rebellion. They reached the wash house without being seen. Inside, Isaiah worked quickly and confidently, sliding a heavy copper tub aside to reveal a trap door in the stone floor. The hinges protested as he lifted it, exposing a narrow flight of steps down into darkness. "How did you learn of this?" Josephine asked above the sound of the rain. "Phyllis," Isaiah replied. "She's worked here 40 years and knows every hidden passage made for servants to move unseen." Beatrice peered into the black pit below. "We need light." Nisa produced a small tin lantern and struck a match with trembling fingers. The tiny flame painted their faces in an eerie light as they began to go down. The tunnel was better built than they expected, with brick walls and a packed dirt floor. It ran straight for about 50 yards and then split. The right passage led to the infirmary, Isaiah said. The left. He did not know. Josephine hesitated only a moment. "We'll take the left first. If it connects to Mother's secret room, it may hold the proof we need." The left corridor continued for 20 yards and stopped at a heavy oak door banded with iron. A large padlock held it shut. "We can't break that," Beatrice whispered. Josephine produced a ring of keys she had taken from her mother's study the week before. "I've been waiting for the right moment," she said. The 3rd key fit, and the lock surrendered with a click that sounded too loud in the narrow space. Isaiah pushed the door open and lifted the lantern. The small chamber beyond was arranged with careful order. Glass-fronted cabinets lined the walls, rows of specimen jars inside. A large desk stood in the center, its surface crowded with ledgers and odd instruments. The air smelled of chemicals and something sweet and clinging that caught in the throat. Beatrice stumbled back and let out a sound that might have been a prayer or a cry. "Oh God," she whispered. Inside each jar floated a preserved human fetus at different stages of growth. Neat labels gave parentage, dates of gestation, and cause of termination. The notes included deliberate removals when defects were suspected or traits judged undesirable. Josephine moved to the desk with rising dread and opened a leather-bound journal. "These are Dr. Parnell's notes," she breathed. "He's been doing experiments in selective breeding using the enslaved as subjects." Isaiah stepped closer, lantern held steady, and peered into the cabinets. "These dates go back 20 years, he said. "Before your mother took full control," Josephine realized. "It began as our father's project, but Mother made it systematic after his death." She turned pages and halted as a new set of entries caught her eye. "Isaiah, these aren't all from enslaved women," she said. She pointed to entries marked with the family crest. The records showed surrogates used to carry children fathered by selected men, children raised as legitimate members of the family. That explained why Caroline was so loyal. She had been part of it from the start. Josephine felt her voice go hollow. She knows. She was involved from the beginning. "But why would she keep doing this?" Beatrice asked, face twisted with horror and confusion. "What is the aim of it all?" Voices echoed down the right-hand passage. the infirmary direction, carried by the damp air. Elelanina's clear tones were unmistakable, and a man's deeper voice answered. Lieutenant Blackwood was being shown what had been promised at dinner. "We have to hide," Isaiah urged, snuffing the lantern. "If they find us here—" "No," Josephine cut him off, voice suddenly firm. "This ends tonight. I'm taking these records. They are evidence of crimes that even Charleston will not ignore." She began stuffing ledgers and journals into a canvas sack she found beneath the desk. Isaiah moved to the trapdoor. "We must reach the infirmary first," he said. "My sister is still there, and your mother is bringing Blackwood, too." Josephine nodded. "Beatrice, take these back to the house and hide them under my floorboards," she ordered. "If we are not back by dawn, bring them to Judge Holloway in Charleston. Only him. Do you understand?" Reluctantly, Beatrice tucked the sack under her cloak and slipped away through the tunnel. Josephine and Isaiah retraced their steps to the fork and took the right path, moving as quietly as they could. Voices grew louder as they neared another door. A pool of lamplight spilled into the passageway while they pressed themselves into shadow. Through the open space, they heard a casual, chilling line. "The breeding program produces about 30 infants each year," one voice said, as if discussing the yield of a field. The other answered in the same tone, as if it were a routine fact, not a moral outrage. The three, 2 sisters and a young man desperate to save his kin, stood in the dark and listened, each understanding in that moment how deep the secret went and how much danger they had stepped into. With careful selection, we've raised birth weight by 12% and cut infant deaths to under 5%. "Remarkable results indeed," came Blackwood's reply, his voice oddly flat. "And these women are mostly slaves, correct?" "Yes, though we've seen success with certain mixed lineage surrogates as well. The secret is strict record-keeping and tightly controlled conditions." Isaiah's face twisted with rage. Josephine put a steadying hand on his arm, shaking her head in warning. They needed to know the full scope of the operation before making any move. "Do you think these methods could be scaled?" Blackwood asked. "With proper oversight?" "Absolutely. Picture plantations across the South producing not only cotton and tobacco, but a bred human stock selected for specific traits, strength, endurance, and a degree of intelligence. The economic potential is huge. And your own daughters, do they accept their place in this plan?" There was a pause before Elelanina answered. "Caroline accepts our vision completely. Josephine has a scientific mind but lacks full commitment to progress. And Beatrice? She comes of age next month. Her first pairing is already arranged." "With whom?" Blackwood's voice sharpened. "Why, Lieutenant?" Elelanina said with a cold laugh. "With you, naturally. Your bloodline, your military bearing, your intellect, all excellent traits to introduce into our program. Of course, you'll be paid well. Your brother Thomas has also agreed to a similar arrangement with Caroline." In the hidden passage, Josephine stifled a sound of horror. Isaiah's hand moved toward the knife at his belt, but Josephine held him back. They needed more proof, more witnesses, before they confronted Elelanina Tmain. "I see," Blackwood said after a long silence. "And Dr. Parnell runs the medical side. He's been indispensable. His research into hereditary traits is decades ahead of European science. Together we are refining methods that will change how humans are cultivated." As Elelanina sketched out her monstrous plan, Isaiah and Josephine eased the door wider, catching a partial view down the infirmary's main corridor. At the far end, Elelanina stood with Blackwood near one of the patient rooms. Dr. Parnell had joined them, offering clinical notes on the women visible through the observation windows. "My sister," Isaiah whispered urgently. "She would be in the recovery ward, third door on the right, according to Phyllis." Josephine nodded. "We need a diversion." Before they could shape a plan, the main entrance burst open. Caroline Tremaine stood in the doorway, drenched and wild-eyed, her father's pistol held tightly in one white-knuckled hand. "Mother," she cried, "Josephine and Beatrice are missing, and I found this in the tunnel." She held up Josephine's journal, pages fluttering. "They know everything. They're planning to expose us." Eleanor's face hardened to stone. "Find them," she ordered. "Search every building, every field. They must not be allowed to leave the plantation." In the hidden passageway, Josephine and Isaiah exchanged grim looks. Their chance for stealth had vanished. Now their only hope was to reach Ruth and flee before the Tremaine estate claimed more victims of its horrors. Blackwood had seen brutality in his military service on the frontier. He had watched the ruins after massacres, the collapse of villages struck by disease, and the cruel indifference of fate. Yet nothing in his past prepared him for the cold, organized evil of Elena Tremaine's breeding program. As Caroline's announcement rang out in the infirmary, he used the instant confusion to edge away from Elena and the doctor. His right hand went to the inside pocket of his coat, where he carried not just his commission as a lieutenant, but also papers marking him as a federal investigator sent from Washington after troubling reports of illegal breeding operations. "Mrs. Tremaine," he said evenly, "perhaps your daughter simply went for a walk." "Do not patronize me," Elena snapped. "Caroline, alert Mr. Webb and the overseers. Question every slave, search every building." She turned to Parnell. "Secure the records. If needed, prepare to move the subjects." As Caroline hurried into the storm, Blackwood noticed a flicker at the corridor's far end. A door opening a crack, and a man's face appearing for just an instant before vanishing. The new house slave, he realized, the one who had served at dinner with such careful watchfulness. "Dr. Parnell," Elena continued, oblivious to Blackwood's notice, "perhaps you should show the lieutenant your laboratory while I direct the search." Parnell inclined his head. "This way, sir. You'll find our research protocols quite interesting." Blackwood followed down a side passage, weighing his options. His original mission had been quiet reconnaissance, confirm the rumors, note the facts, then return with marshals to close the operation. But with the Tremaine girls in danger and a plantation-wide hunt now underway, the schedule had been forced forward. "Our breeding methods are based on practices already proven in animal husbandry," Parnell explained as they descended a narrow stair. "We have adapted the process for humans with notable results." "And these results are documented?" Blackwood asked, keeping his tone controlled. "Extensively," he said, 20 years of data spanning multiple generations, proof that you can emphasize traits by careful selection." Parnell's voice had the clinical detachment of a man talking about crop rotation rather than about people. At the bottom of the stairs they reached a heavy door. Parnell drew a key from his waistcoat, then hesitated, studying Blackwood's face. "You seem troubled, Lieutenant. Having second thoughts about Mrs. Tremaine's offer?" Blackwood kept his military calm. "I'm simply taking in the scale of this operation. It's broader than I imagined." Parnell seemed reassured and opened the door. "This is where we keep our records and specimens. You'll understand the scientific importance once you—" He stopped short, staring at the room's disorder. "Someone's been here," he gasped. "The records. Some of them are missing." Blackwood looked over Parnell's shoulder, noting open cabinets and a cleared desk. "Maybe Mrs. Tremaine moved them already." "No," Parnell said. "This is not how I left it this afternoon." He moved among the specimen jars, checking labels. The Tane lineage documents are gone, and the breeding projections for the next generation. Blackwood seized the moment. "Doctor, I think we should return upstairs. There may have been a breach of security." A sharp scream cut through the air from above. Parnell shot his head up. That came from the recovery ward. Both men ran back up the stairs, Blackwood deliberately staying a beat behind. The main corridor had become chaos. 2 slave women had broken free from their rooms and were scuffling with Nurse Hammond. At the far end, Elela Nena was shouting orders to house slaves summoned from the mansion. In the confusion, Blackwood spotted the slave he had noticed earlier, Isaiah, urging a young woman and what looked like Josephine Tumaine toward a side exit. The other daughter was nowhere to be seen. Blackwood acted instantly. Reaching inside his coat, he pulled out not a pistol, but a whistle, standard army issue with a clear, high tone meant to cut through noise. He blew 3 sharp blasts, a prearranged signal for federal marshals posted around the plantation perimeter. The sound sliced through the commotion. Elela Nena turned, confusion giving way to fury as she understood what the signal meant. "You!" she hissed. "You're no breeder." "Federal investigator," Blackwood confirmed, producing his credentials. "This operation is over, Mrs. Tumaine." Elela Nena laughed in a brittle, dangerous way. "You fool. Do you think I haven't protected myself? Much of Charleston's judiciary profits from my research. The governor himself has backed our expansion." "Perhaps," Blackwood said, "but I answer to Washington, not Charleston. Stopping illegal slave trading in fields like yours is a federal priority." Parnell began to edge away, clearly eyeing his own escape. Blackwood kept one eye on him while he addressed Elela Nena. "The only question now," he said, "is whether you will face justice alone or try to drag your powerful friends into this to save yourself." Elela Nena's reply was not fear or denial. Her face cooled into a small, hard smile. "Lieutenant, your federal reach stops at the bounds of this estate. My overseers are armed, loyal, and well paid. Your marshals may never get past our gates." She called out, "Mr. Webb, we have an intruder." Silas Webb appeared from a side corridor, the plantation overseer, flanked by 2 men with shotguns. Their faces said they would welcome a reason to use them. The standoff broke when Caroline returned, her dress splattered with mud, the pistol still in her hand. Mother, Josephine, and that new house slave tried to escape through the north fields with one of the breeding women. Elela Nena's attention snapped to the woods. "Stop them at all costs. The documents they've taken." At that moment, the hidden pair ducked into the next cell of the passage, hearts hammering. Josephine clutched her journal to her chest, pages damp with sweat. Isaiah pressed a finger to his lips and listened. Footsteps and shouted orders echoed through the corridors above. They could hear the distant crack of marshals' boots, the clatter of gates being barred, the low murmur of men coordinating searches. Outside, the storm that had driven Caroline in from the fields still battered the windows with rain and wind, a blur of water and dark trees. The plantation, once a place of ordered routine, had been thrown into violent motion. They crawled forward a few feet and then another, the tunnel's air cool but stale against their faces. Josephine's thoughts raced. Ruth was their only hope. Ruth, who knew the marshal's schedule, who had promised a rendezvous at the old ash by the north fence if anything went wrong. If they could reach Ruth, maybe they could slip into the timber and ride the back roads to safety. But the documents, those records Parnell mentioned, could not be left in Elela Nena's hands. They proved the whole scheme, the lineage charts, the notes on selection, the ledgers that mapped which women had borne which children, and the financial projections that showed how profitable this would be. If those papers fell back into the master's possession, every plan to stop the program would be ruined. Above them, someone cursed. Steps approached the corridor's entrance. Josephine flattened herself into the earth and felt Isaiah press his weight flat over her shoulder. The pipe they had used to reach the tunnel had been masked under dirt at the entrance. They had only a few moments before the searchers might check every hidden space. A voice called out, and then another answered. The searchers' boots passed close enough that Josephine could hear their soles slap the wood and the scrape of a pickaxe against stone. Time felt fragile, like the skin on a drum. If even one of the marshals turned and looked down the tunnel, they would be found. Isaiah moved without thinking, silent and quick. He slipped from the tunnel's mouth and eased open the grate covering the drainage channel that led toward the ash tree. The space beyond was narrow, but it offered a path. Josephine followed, journal against her breast, her limbs numb with cold and fear. Ahead, the channel dropped and curved, its roof low and slick with moss. They pushed forward, crawling on hands and knees through the dark, breath held, the distant sounds of men and dogs passing above. Each inch felt like stealing a life back from the hands of those who would take it away. They emerged near the edge of the north field, the rain reduced to a fine mist. The ash tree stood as a lone silhouette against the gray sky, its branches whipping in the wind. Ruth was already waiting, wrapped in a coarse coat, her face drawn and alert. Behind her, 2 riders adjusted their saddles. The marshal's whistles still sounded faintly from the distance, but the outer cordon had been distracted by the commotion at the house. Ruth flung the saddle to one of the riders, handed Josephine a parcel wrapped in oilcloth that felt thick with important papers. "This is what you took from the lab," she whispered, voice quick. "Keep it safe and get it out of state. I will go back and try to draw them away." Josephine shook her head. "I can't leave without my sister, not without Beatrice." Ruth's jaw tightened. "Then help me lead them out. Together we can split the search." Isaiah gave a curt nod. They had no time for speeches. The 4 of them mounted and rode hard, mud kicking from the horses' flanks, the rain blurring the road and the world into a smear of gray. Behind them, shouts rose and the plantation erupted into a chase. The documents were safe for the moment, but the storm that followed would test every promise and every courage. In that split second, Josephine charged forward, her soaked dress clinging to her as she lunged at Webb. The unexpected attack caused him to stagger back, pistol swinging wildly. The baby screamed, but Ruth managed to shield him with her arms, pressing him tightly against her chest. Isaiah took advantage of the distraction, twisting the second overseer to the ground and pinning him until he could no longer struggle. Moses, the ferry operator, stood firm at the edge of the dock, gaff hook raised, eyes flashing with determination. With a single command, he herded the men toward the shallow riverbank, using the hook to push them back without striking. Webb cursed, fury evident in every line of his face. But the sudden convergence of Josephine, Isaiah, Ruth, and Moses left him momentarily paralyzed. Blackwood spurred his horse closer, taking a defensive stance between the trio and the remaining overseers. "Move, now!" Blackwood shouted, voice cutting through the drizzle. Ruth clutched the baby tighter as Isaiah lifted her toward the ferry. Josephine followed, carrying the documents in one hand, and with her other, she grasped the rope ladder Moses lowered from the flat-bottomed boat. The 3 scrambled aboard, hearts pounding, water sloshing against the hull. Webb finally regained his wits, raising his pistol to fire, but Blackwood's revolver cracked in response. A shot rang out, embedding in the wooden deck just beside Webb's boot. He froze, eyes wide, realizing the futility of resistance. The remaining overseers, seeing their leader's hesitation, slowly dropped their weapons. Josephine's chest heaved with relief, though exhaustion threatened to pull her to the deck. Moses shoved off from the dock, and the ferry lurched into the current. The river was swollen from the storm, but the flat-bottomed boat cut through it with surprising speed. Josephine knelt beside Ruth, wrapping the baby in her wet shawl, while Isaiah kept a careful eye on the far bank, where the first flickers of dawn were beginning to pale the night sky. "Are we safe?" Ruth whispered, voice trembling. "For now," Josephine replied, glancing at the darkened silhouette of the plantation in the distance. "But we're not free until we reach the northern banks and the ferry landing. Every moment counts." Blackwood rode alongside the ferry, scanning the opposite shore. The marshes and embankments offered some concealment, but he knew Elena's loyalists would not give up easily. "We need to move quickly. There's a shallow channel a mile upriver where the currents are gentler. We can make time there without being seen," he said, voice steady but urgent. Josephine handed the gold locket and part of the documents to Blackwood. "Keep these safe," she instructed. "They prove everything. If we survive, they'll bring her down." Blackwood nodded solemnly, tucking them into his coat as the ferry picked up speed. The first rays of sunlight began to break through the storm clouds, reflecting off the swollen river in streaks of silver. The landscape shifted from shadowed marshes to low-lying fields, still dotted with puddles and mud from the storm. The distant sound of hooves reminded them that Webb and his men were still searching, but the tide of fortune had shifted.